Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Mental Corner podcast, the show where I bring on guests from all different backgrounds to talk all the things mental health. I am, of course, not in my studio. I am in a hotel in Ottawa for work. I feel like a celebrity. I'm not going to lie. You walk into the door and on the TV it says, "Welcome, Harrison Potvin." Feels a little nice. I won't lie, so I'm going to enjoy it for the night. But yeah, no studio time today. But because I love you guys so much, we makeshift a studio wherever we go. So for this episode of the show, I am joined by Patrice Cammarano. Patrice is a member of St. Thomas University's track and field team. He is also a co-president of St. Thomas University's Mental Health Society, which is the first mental health support group of its kind at the university. Patrice was a blast to have on, and this is a really super important discussion, so I really want to thank him again for coming on and having this discussion with me. Now, before we get into the episode today, guys, you know the drill. If you're listening, please like, comment, share, subscribe, give 5 stars if you're on that podcast platform. Share with someone who might want to hear this episode. It's a really great one, and I can't wait for you to listen. I'll talk to y'all very soon. Have a great rest of your day. Peace.
We are good to go. Patrice, thank you so much for joining me today.
No, it's my pleasure to be on your show today.
So the first question I ask everybody, it's kind of a broad one, but where did your whole journey start? Like, what got you into advocating for mental health?
So it's actually a quite complicated story. So growing up, I was gonna say the typical high school guy. I just didn't care about all the mental health presentation. I didn't care about all of that stuff. I was sort of like, I like it because I'm missing like a full period of class. I'm missing an hour. So be it. But I never really paid any attention to it. And like growing up, it just wasn't part of my reality. Like we never really talked about it at home. At school, I didn't pay attention. So then I got to university, and then I met this cute girl, and like she slowly opened up about like some of her struggles and things like that. And at first I wanted to run away just because I never heard of any of that. I had no clue how to deal with it. I just didn't understand the whole like reality of it. But then slowly, like I was like, I kind of really like her, but like I have to overcome this. So then I chose like, I'll just like talk with her because I like to talk and just to get to know people. So then we slowly talked, and then I realized like I had no idea. Like I just didn't understand like a whole part of like our world just wasn't like something I've ever faced. So then I got more comfortable within like she wanted to found a mental health society on campus. So then I was like, this is a great opportunity. I'm on board. Like I will be like supporting you. And then I ended up being a co-president, a co-founder of this whole society. And then I thought like I can do so much more. So then I saw opportunities here and there. So my first one that I've seen was Jack Talk speaker. Love to speak. And then I was getting sort of passionate about this, about talking about mental health. So I was like, this is a great thing. Why not? So then I jumped on board, did that for a couple of years. Then there was network rep opportunity for New Brunswick. So I was like, why not? Why not just like, let's do it. And then throughout my whole journey, I also realized that like a lot of things that I was doing that I thought was perfectly normal actually wasn't that normal. It was actually just like sort of me just like always like being blind to mental health and just being like, you know what? It was never part of my world. I can advocate for others, but it's never going to like affect me. And then that's sort of where I understood that everyone has one. And that's important that we like sort of care about it and do things to really foster it and make it better and just fulfill our lives like that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. When you were looking back at your own life and realizing that the things you were doing that you assumed were normal were just because you didn't really know about mental health and everything, can you pinpoint a time where all of these things started to happen with you?
It'd be really so understand the whole thing. I used to be in a bigger body growing up, so I used to be quite big, and then I decided to lose weight. And then all of that was like fairly healthy, fairly normal, just like your typical New Year's resolution. So then I slowly went down a bad path where I would be like restricting foods and like dieting, over exercising, so all these things. And but I thought that was absolutely normal. Like it's sort of like I was like, that's what you got to do to stay fit.
Hmm.
But then I talk with more people and just realize that like eating disorders aren't just for like your like university white girl that's like super skinny. Like it can really affect anyone. And then it's through research and really I my moment exactly was I ate, I think it was like a chocolate bar or something one evening, and I was like, oh man, I shouldn't eat that. Now I need to run 10 kilometers.
Hmm.
And then at one point, I was like, there's just something that seems off about this. I never heard of anyone having to do this just to compensate for this little chocolate bar. So I was like, something must be off. And then it's through talking and just like talking with people and just like getting the support and just realizing that like that was not healthy.
Right. How tough was it to initially start talking about it? Because, like you mentioned, the whole eating disorder thing is often referred to as a woman's issue, because the guys who experience this stuff, which happens all the time, it's just never discussed at all.
I mean, it was quite hard at first just because for a long time I just didn't want to acknowledge that that's
Hmm.
what was happening. I just like thought like, I like I'm just like overreacting. Like I was just sort of like almost like gaslighting myself and just like making me believe that like I do not have that. I'm just like overreacting, everything's fine. But it's really with my girlfriend and just like how she opened up about her struggles like quite easily that slowly felt comfortable just to like express some doubts. So at that time, I was just like, what do you think of this? Is this normal? Like, have you ever heard of this? And then she's the one that really like helped me, guided me like through like her journey, like what worked for her and like finding resources. And then slowly I was like, you know what? Like it's either I'm gonna accept it or I'm gonna eventually destroy myself. So it was a constant battle, but eventually it's just with the support of people that was like, you know what, I gotta tackle this.
Hmm. And did you ever mention it to anybody other than your girlfriend, or did that come way later?
That actually came way later. I mean, like I did some counseling and like obviously I talked about it there just because like the confidential portion, but it's because I've sort of built myself around just like high achievement success and like my whole like weight loss journey was like on every job resume and everything I sent out whenever there's like the motivation, I'm like, hey, I have the drive, I did this, like this is a huge accomplishment. So then my head, if I were to talk to people, it's sort of like my number one selling point is actually not that great, not that good of a selling point.
Hmm.
So slowly I realized that like, you know what, like, yeah, I did lose weight, but that's not gonna be my selling point. I have a lot more stuff that I can give. I'm a lot more attributes. I do not need to define myself just based on the number.
And what was their initial reaction to that?
Initially, a lot of people just were shocked or like just didn't like realize that was going on just because like it's not going to be obvious. Like
Hmm.
I was still eating, I was doing a lot of things, like I was just exercising lots, I was just like basically just eating like your healthy meal just pushed to an extreme. It's just lots of veggies constantly, like that sort of thing. So like from the outside, if you do not like understand orthorexia very much, it seems normal, it seems like your typical gym bro thing, like nothing's like that's strange. But then slowly, like just like pinpointing and showing some examples, like, hey, like the fact that like I see a chocolate bar like terrifies me. That's like when they started to understand that, like, oh, that's actually like a big deal. And that's something like you really gotta get help for. And then they were supportive. But at the start, it was sort of like I had to explain and just sort of like almost advocate to get support just because it didn't seem legit at first.
Right. And how old are you? Because I think the whole eating disorder thing in men is still such a new kind of topic of discussion. When did you open up, like the year?
It was that's tough one. Like it's so started about like a year and a half ago to two
Hmm.
years, but then it really got more into the last year. Just I've been like more vocal about it. Like I've talked on like different podcasts or like did like lives on Instagram, that type of thing. Like before, it was more like I would do it, but it's like very censored and just like watching everything I'd say just to ensure that like I don't rub anyone the wrong way. No one comes across this and then sees me differently. But then I came to a point where I'm like, this is my story. And like, if you're going to judge me badly for it, screw you, I'm just gonna move forward from it.
Yeah, yeah. I can relate to that so hard because they I had an article written about me in like 2018 about Bell Let's Talk Day, and I didn't tell them a thing. I was like, "Hey, I struggle kind of," but then I was like, I don't want to tell them all of it because then everyone's gonna think I'm weird.
Yeah, it's sort of that thing that like you just feel like you got almost censor yourself just by fear almost, and that's like in the moment it feels normal. Like I don't know for you, but for me it really felt like normal and the right thing to do. But when I look back, I'm like, man, what was I thinking?
Yeah, yeah. It's like I just wish I was honest.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's like all part of like the growth that I've like learned. It's like you'll make mistakes, you'll do things and you'll just almost question it, be like, why did I do this? But then eventually, like as you move like in it, you just realize that like, hey, like I had to do those mistakes in order to learn like what's like good for me and what's like appropriate for me. Just like if I didn't do those mistakes, I would not be here. So it's sort of like they're mistakes, but we can only learn from mistakes.
Yeah, man, you nailed it. Absolutely. And you were a runner, correct? Or are you still running?
Yeah, I'm still a runner. So like it's sort of like when I entered university, I never actually like ran competitively. Like I did some like the field portion of track and field. So I used to do shot put, discus, and a little bit of javelin.
Hmm.
But then I lost a lot of weight, and at where I went to university, we just didn't have anything field related. So it was sort of like if I want to keep doing track and field, gotta start running. So I was like, you know what, like I am in shape for this, so why not? So then I just went into it and just like started running, and it's a fun thing, but like everything else in my life, I just need to use moderation, not push it to an extreme. But it's a fun thing. I do miss the field portion, but running it's sort of a good thing at the same time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, unrelated, but what's your event?
So indoors, I do the 60 meter and the 600 meter.
Hmm.
So it's kind of atypical because usually people do like 60 and 300 indoors. And then
Right.
if you do the 600, you'll do like the 1000 meters. But then they're what works for me. So I was like, I'll just do those. And then outside, it's more of like the 100 meter, 200 meter. I did try some 400 meters. Not a fan of it right now, but I might train to get better. Or when I graduate and like I'm out of like youth sports and everything, I might just go for like a half marathon or marathon also just to like learn something new.
Yeah, hell yeah, why not? Push yourself.
Yeah, learn something and just like practice, and because it's a good thing. Like it's a big challenge, but at the same time, I'm like, why not? Like I maybe I'll qualify for a Boston Marathon one day.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't even realize you had to qualify for that. I just thought people were crazy enough to sign up.
No, so some marathon you actually like gotta run in certain designated like races. You gotta run below a certain pace just because they want to ensure to get the top of the top. So
Mm.
like I looked at the times and right now it's not gonna happen for another 5 years. But after that, like there's potential. If I put in the work and the effort and just like stay consistent with it, like I do feel like potentially I could. But right now I'm gonna just aim for those like local marathon and half marathons and just like enjoy and have fun with it.
Yeah, right on, man. Build your way up. Now, when you were experiencing your eating disorder, was that in line with your running? Like, were you doing both at the same time?
Yeah, so they were actually like both at the same time. They didn't start at the same time. So the eating disorder sort of came beforehand, just like through like the whole weight loss journey, and then losing weight sort of opened doors, but then to keep those doors open, I was like just on this mindset that I need to like constantly like do everything like based on that. But then it's sort of also like when I was running, like I could notice like in my like first and second year, like just like injury after injury, just because from lack of like food and like proper nutrients. And like I was always tired. Like I just couldn't get any time or anything. So it all led me that I had to take like a scratch off like one of the AUS competitions. So like the big like competition in Atlantic, just because I was injured. I could not run it. And like that was a big disappointment for me just because I wanted to really like run the 4 years. But then COVID happened. So then, well, I'll actually get two out of it. But then I'm at peace with it now, but it's sort of like looking back, it's sort of like I made myself like poorly perform just because I didn't like attach proper value on like if you train, you gotta eat and you gotta make sure you eat like everything and not just like vegetable almost. So it's sort of like because right now, like from what I realized from like just this whole recovery and just getting back into it, I can easily top my like times that I did like 2 years ago. And although I took a year off from training, so it's just to realize that like I was just really just like basically just harming myself and just making myself do poorly.
Yeah. And I can imagine your energy levels were just shot.
Oh, they were horrible. And like looking back, I was also like, I don't know how people were around me, just because like I was when you're very hungry and you don't realize it, but you are very like for myself, I was quite mean and just like sort of like always grumpy. Nothing would satisfy me. I'd just be in the worst mood like almost every hour of the day until like either I worked out or either I was asleep. So then it's sort of like energy level low, grumpy all the time, but it's all part of the journey.
Yeah, man. When, oof. If how, because you now that you're on the other side of this whole eating journey experience, how would you recommend that someone looking from the outside in approach it if they're thinking that someone they love or a friend or anybody is experiencing an eating disorder? How do you start that conversation?
So it's really to be transparent about it. Like that's what worked for me. It's not gonna work for everyone. I'm someone that like you gotta be blunt with me. You gotta just like figuratively just like slap me in the face.
Hmm.
Just because like when I was in it, I was like just like so blind to everything, just followed my mind. But it's sort of like if someone's there just being like, hey, have you thought about this? Or just like trying to just like initiate a conversation. Just because like that's something that like I did not have. Like I had to initiate a conversation by myself. But I am assuming that if someone was there and just was like, hey, you sure like you okay? Like you're doing this, like just like being there for others and just like really supporting them, like not forcing them to like seek help and like pushing on them. Because if they're not ready, it's not gonna work. They will just like they'll either say yes and never actually go to it, or they'll just like be rigid and never do it. So sort of just be there and just help them realize by themselves that like they might be struggling, that they might need help. And that's the best way, in my opinion, to go about it. But like it's all gonna depend on the person, just because some people will need more into like a friendlier way and just like very smoothly approach. Some will like me just be blunt about it. So it's gonna depend, but at the end of the day, it's never push someone to recover, it's help them to recover.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a big reason why all of us like hesitate to reach out to people because we're all so complicated. We all react differently, and it's one of those things where you're like so hesitant to reach out to your friend because it's like I don't know how they're going to react to this.
Yeah, because they might react well, they might not. Like it- people say the stigma is gone or that it's like decreased. Yeah, it decreased, but then at the same time, it's still very much present in the sense that like you do not know who you can actually trust when you open up about it.
Hmm.
Once you open up about it, you do realize like who's actually there for you and who's not. So that's, in my opinion, it's a pro because it helps you like see who's like truly a friend and who's just there to be there. But it can be quite hard at the start to realize that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the stigma's going away, but we've lived with it for so long. It doesn't just disappear like that.
No, it's like generations too, just because the younger generation seems to be more open about it and have less stigma. Some of the older generation, they still have the stigma. It's still like hard. So it's sort of like when you're like around the different age groups whenever in your day and you want to open up and some of your supports are actually part of the older generation, but they are still like very like stigmatized. It's sort of like how do you go about it just because you're there, and it's sort of like the people I want to have support from might never believe me that I actually need that support. So it's just like it's a hard thing, but it's like slowly but surely it's going to take time, but then hopefully there'll be one day where everyone you can just go basically and be like, hey, I'm struggling, and get the help and support you need.
Yeah, man. Fingers crossed we get there soon. Now with your recovery journey, did that happen during COVID, or did you start recovering prior to that?
So it really happened during COVID, just because prior to COVID was more of like the constant battle almost. Like it was like I knew something was up, but I
Hmm.
just didn't want to acknowledge that something was wrong. But then when everyone was quarantined and it was just basically the world shut down, it's sort of I had so much time on my hands to
Hmm.
just figure things out and just like be like, hey, like I'll try this. And like in a sense, it was a good thing that the world was shut down. I could try almost everything that like I thought would work, and then if it did not work, just move on to the second thing, and just like eventually find like what works for me. And then it's sort of like it's still like an ongoing process. Like there's still days where it's like it's harder than other days, but it's sort of my how I view it. Sort of as long as the bad days aren't worse than what they were, it's positive. It's just always up there. It's not going to be linear up. It's going to move up and down. But as long as the downs are never as down as the previous ones, to me, it's a win.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And was it ever terrifying at the very beginning to kind of have to face yourself? Because that's a convo I have with a lot of people on this show is that when they finally sat down with themselves, they're like, oh shit, there's a lot of stuff here.
Oh yeah, that was it was a very hard thing just because like I was sort of like I'm succeeding in life, like I am like sort of like on the top of everything, and then it's just like being like I am not perfect. I have lots of flaws. There's lots of things that aren't going well. And that was the hard thing. But I feel like another hard thing, especially with eating disorders, was just like gaining some weight back. Just because almost like this whole time in my head, I was like, this is my perfect number. This is how much I need to weigh, no matter what I do. Like completely disregarding like just like basic nutrition and like physics of like if you gain muscle it's gonna move up, but then just disregarding the whole thing and just being sort of like blinded by and being like this is my number. So when that number is starting to go up, I had to like either accept it or just find ways of being like, you know what, like the scale at one point was useful, but maybe now it's not like the proper way to go. So it's just like changing things and just being like, you know what, like bodies are meant to change and they're not going to stay the same forever. And I just need to accept it.
Yeah, that's a big thing in the swim community when we all retire is we all gain a lot of weight. And I feel like it's the same for most athletes because your appetite stays the same, but your exercise routine is gone. So
Yeah.
that's always a tough thing to accept is that you're not gonna stay in that athlete body unless you like again stay in that routine. It's just not realistic.
No, because it's like in university, like life is so different than once you're out of there. Like once you enter like the job market and you start like working a lot, like there's other priorities that arise. And it's like if you constantly just like focus on like training constantly, you're gonna miss out on other opportunities. So it's just finding a proper balance for like what worked for someone and just like realizing like there'll be change and we've got to accept it.
Yeah, absolutely. What were some of the what were some of the ways that you changed the negative self-talk that you were going through?
For myself, it was really just whenever like it was a hard time, it's just finding something like an activity that would just like bring me to peace and just like almost like make me forget about the thoughts. So like during the weight loss journey, it was running and like I love to run, but then it sort of also fueled the issue just from over exercising. So I was like, I like to move my body. I like to exercise, but I cannot constantly do something that's like a high impact activity. So then I moved away from that and thought like I'll try like yoga, like Pilates, like things that are like stretching, just like lower intensity, still moving, but lower intensity and aren't done in a way just to burn calories, but are done in a way just to like help me calm down and like refocus and repurpose myself to be ready to like tackle the next day and just like be like, I'm having those thoughts, but I'll just like stretch, relax, and then move on from it.
Hmm, yeah. Yeah. And when you get how do you push through like the really low days? Cuz you know, recovery is never linear for anything and you're always going to get those little dips in the road. So when you get into that dip, like what pushes you forward?
It's really just like looking back on like what I've achieved and like just how far I've come, it's sort of like I'm faced with two choices. Either I give up and I go back down the spiral, but then either like I accept that today's gonna be a harder day and like a day's 24 hours. I sleep for like 8 hours of those, so that's only gonna be 16 hours. And it's just like looking and like decreasing how horrible it looks and just like making it look like I've come that far. One barrier is not gonna like stop me. It's gonna be hard. But at the end of the day, like there's so many things that I can do today just to like try to get out of this mindset and just like do something. So it's gonna be it's hard, but then at the same time, it's just like for myself, it was a lot of stretching. Like that's actually like what really helped me like just like move away from it. It's just like stretch. Plus, it was a good thing just because I was always tight from my quads from running. So it was
Hmm.
a double win.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. And with the whole pandemic, obviously, all these athletes in university had to stop, and for some, like their whole career basically got taken away way too early. How did you process, getting your sport taken away?
So it was hard, but then at the same time, I did not enter like university sport with the mind of like really working and just being an Olympian at the end. Like I
Hmm.
was realistic. I never trained, worked out to be a runner. Like I've just sort of like picked on it. It's been 4 years. I'm realistic. There's guys out there that have been running for like 12, 16 years. So it's sort of like, I'm like, I came here to have fun originally. And sort of like, I can have fun by moving in different ways. Like it doesn't need to be like in like a competition setting. So like during COVID, I could still go outside and run and just like enjoy like those like long runs and like be outside. I had like some dumbbells that I've purchased at home. So I did like all these like YouTube videos of like working out and just like finding things that are like different, but still like made me feel like, you know what, I'm moving, I'm enjoying it. It's a challenge and just like learning new skills. Like one thing was learning how to do a proper push-up because like I
Hmm.
could do some, but then realized that like my form and everything was horrible. So it's just like tackling new challenges and just like realizing like university sport is fun. It's a great thing. But at the end of the day, it's not going to make or break me. It's not going to decide on like whether I get to move on in life. It's sort of like it's a bonus added to my life, just makes it more fun. But I can have fun different ways.
Yeah, that's an important mindset to have because we get sucked into it as athletes in university because it's like your whole life at that moment. And so you just assume that it's going to be your whole life forever, and then when you're out of it you're like, "Oh, shoot. Nope. It's not."
Yeah, it's sort of like you get out and you're like, what do I do now? It's sort of basically the whole week I've been spent like my weeks were just packed with training, working out, and then sort of like, oh, so much free time, what to do with it.
Yeah, that was that was the one thing for me. I try to tell like the swimmers I used to swim with who are still swimming, I try to tell them like when you get out, you have so much free time. You got to find something else to do or you're going to go crazy.
Yeah, it's a big thing for like many athletes just because basically we're in a routine. Like it's always the same routine of like working out and just eating all those days with like workout classes. And then if there's sometimes here and there, like you pack some extra things here and there, but it's like once you're out, it's sort of like you gotta rethink your whole schedule, just the whole way you were doing things. And for some, it's gonna be hard, and for some, it's gonna be easier. But it's just like at the end of the day, like my way to see it is just like prioritize what you like. If you like working out, just like find new ways to do it and just like make it in your schedule and just like build it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And for some athletes, I mean, for most people, with the whole pandemic, there were different ways that people reacted to it, obviously. And one of the ways is, you stress eat or you just don't move, you're sedentary. And people gained some weight because of it. Now, I want to make it specifically for athletes in this regard, but if you're an athlete who maybe gained some weight during the pandemic and you don't have the athlete body that you entered the pandemic with, in your opinion, what is the best way for them to go about it the next few months in an effective and healthy way for themselves?
Really, it would be to focus away from like losing weight because if they focus like solely on losing weight, they will start off like many people like probably healthy in a way, and then be like, oh, I can cut it down, I can do this, and then eventually you drop instantly, but then your body's not gonna like it and it's gonna fight back. So it's really like for people that like maybe like let's take a runner for example. Let's say your time is like now running like a 1 kilometer is a minute, 30 seconds longer than what it used to be. It's sort of like being like, okay, I'll try to get it down by 10 seconds. Like doing those sort of goals will yield the same results. It's just viewing it differently. It's sort of your focus shouldn't be on like a specific weight. It should be rather on like performance. And that performance sort of like if you were like a basketball player and just and your cardio is down a little bit, like maybe do a couple more cardio sessions just to like get back into it. It's just like viewing it differently will just like make you see the whole situation differently, which I think like for many people is just like realizing that like you can almost program yourself to view a situation from many ways. It's just choosing the one that's going to yield the best results.
Yeah, knowing you have the power to change your outlook is important. I mean, I never thought that. I was like, well, this is just the situation I'm in and it sucks and that's just the way it goes. And I never thought that you could just change your mindset.
I feel it's a lot of people. It's just
Yeah.
like because when you're in it, you're like, this sucks. And like if you don't like look past it and you just like get there, things aren't gonna like change positively. Like you'll just be in that mindset. And it takes a lot of time and effort to actually like be like, hey, like there's other ways to see it. It's not gonna be like, okay, well, this sucks. And then, oh, but if I think positively, it'll go better. Like it's not like that. It's just like you gotta actually put in the effort and like it's gonna take time, but then it's like eventually it's gonna get better.
Yeah, definitely. Now, if you were, when you first heard about mental health and everything, and even before that in high school, you always kind of just brush it off. You're like, ah, whatever, it's not really a thing. But knowing what you know now and going through what you've gone through, what would be one thing you would want to tell yourself if you were in the same room as high school you right now?
Probably I'd just be like, hey, like it might sound weird, but just focus, just listen on this. Because if it's not going to be useful for you and like you don't see the value for yourself, it's going to teach you important things on how to be there for others and just like create a supportive environment. So whenever you actually need help, people will be there for you because you've been there for them. And just like not being like almost like just like self-centered. It's sort of like it might not work for you, but it's going to work for someone. So just like be there for others and then others will be there for you.
Yeah, I love that, man. And my last question for you, Patrice. Ooh, technical difficulties. My last question for you. You co-founded the first mental health support group at St. Thomas University, and being the first at anything, especially when it comes to mental health, I can't imagine is easy at all. So, with that experience in mind that you have, if someone's listening who may be hesitant to open up or start a movement for mental health in their community, their school, their friend group, anything, but they're afraid of the pushback, they're afraid of how people are going to view them for wanting to do it, what would you want to tell them?
Really persevere just because at the end of the day, you'll get pushback. Not everyone's going to agree, but that's the same with everything. Like you could just say things like pineapple belongs on pizza type of thing, and you'll
It
get
does.
pushback on that. See, like there's things like that. It's just like simple things. Like there will always be pushback. There will always be people that will judge you for whatever you do. Like you could wear like jeans one day and you never wear jeans and they'll judge you for it. So it's sort of like being like just realizing why you're doing it. Like you want to do it because it matters to you and something you think is important to do, then just do it. Go with it. And like just persevere. And then people that will support you, you will see who they are. And then from there, you build almost like a community of people ready to like bring change and like be there for each other. And then it's just like at the end of the day, like there's gonna be negative people, there's gonna be pushback, there's gonna be people telling you you should not be doing this. By the end of the day, it's your life. So do something that matters to you with it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, man. When are you guys back in training yet?
Yeah, we started. So it's been quite of a roller coaster. So like in September, we were training outside for basically until like it starts snowing. So then afterwards, we moved a little bit inside with like treadmills, just because like where I'm located, there's one indoor track and it's on a military base. And then at that time, they were still like everything shut down. So then in January, New Brunswick just like almost all of Canada just like shut down. So then we had like a month and a half off, and then we slowly got back into it. And now we're back at like the military base just because everything's easing off. So it's sort of like it's nice to be back and just like have that like track practice. But like it's been a roller coaster.
Man, I bet. Oh my goodness. Is there a meet like coming up? Like, do you guys have a schedule?
Even that got all like initially like the season was supposed to be over by this point,
Hmm.
but then because everything got shut down, they just like moved it. So then there's actually one meet coming up next weekend, and then the weekend after is AUS, so just like the Atlantic University Sports Competition. So then it's gonna be wrapped up within those like next 2 to 3 weeks. But then it's sort of like it's all coming to an end, and it's just like it's a fun thing, it's a fun experience. And plus like this year being like the track captain, and one of the only that actually like returned, just because most of our team graduated during the COVID year. It's kind
Hmm.
of nice to be there with the rookies and just like help them and just like guide them through it, just because it's going to be my legacy in one way, so I'm happy to just like do it this way.
Yeah, man, I love that. That's important too. Like when you become a captain, you realize it's bigger than you at that point.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like it's really like you're there. It's sort of like I've always viewed it as like an individual sport, just because it's individual based, but then there's also the whole team spirit. And it's just like being there for each other. And like that's one thing. Like it always comes up, be there for each other. No matter like doesn't need to be someone that's like struggling with their mental health. Like even when you're training, it's just like someone's like it's just like a harder practice. Just support them and just like push them, and then everyone's gonna have like a better time. And that's one thing I noticed. Like if you're there for others, just things are better.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, if listeners want to follow you or keep up to date with the AUS that's coming up or anything, well, I guess when this gets released. When is AUS again?
It'd be March 18th. So
Oh,
that's like in
yeah.
2 weeks.
Okay, never mind. So if people are listening and they want to get to know more about you and follow your journey and all the work that you do, where can they find you?
The best place would be on Instagram. So really my handle is just my first name dot my last name. So just Patrice.Cammarano. It's the best way. Like that's there's not a lot of posts. I use a lot of stories just because I share whatever I come across, and like that's sort of my way of sharing. But that's like some of the work I do. But also like in the coming weeks, I also work now at jack.org. So there's some work that I do there that people can see on the website, and like with National Summit, all these events. So there's like different ways. Like there's not one way, but I'd say Instagram is probably the best way. But at the end of the day, if like people could find me in like a newspaper and hear about my story or something, so you never know.
I love it, man. I'll put those links down below, and this is coming out after AUS, but best of luck to you, man. I'm predicting a gold, and I expect a gold from you. No, I'm kidding. But best of luck to you. I hope everything goes well.
Well, really, thank you. I'll try for that goal. Like, who knows? Like, like this Australian athlete that was like not that good of a speed skater, Stephen Bradbury, he did one goal because everyone else fell in like all of his races. So who knows? Everyone might fail, and then at the end of the day, I get a goal.
There you go. I'll send that energy over your way, man. All right, Patrice, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
No, it was my pleasure. It was a great time.
And to all my listeners, I will see you guys next time.